Welcome back to the Manc Entrepreneur YouTube channel, and in today's video I want to share with you basically what I spent my Sunday doing. And on Sunday I was lucky enough to get tickets to TEDx Manchester. Now I imagine I don't need to explain to you what TED Talks are or what a TEDx event is. If you're not sure, hit it in Google. But I, along with so many people that I know, have spent many hours on YouTube, especially, watching TED Talks from people around the world, from events held around the world with incredible speakers, some that you will have heard of and many that you won't have heard of. TEDx Manchester has been around now for a good few years, and for the past 3 years, I've tried to get tickets and always failed. However, this year I was lucky enough that as soon as they got announced, I was at the computer and I got tickets. So that meant 2018 was the first year that I managed to get to my first TED event. I didn't really know what to expect. When they announced the program of speakers, I knew 2 of them, and the rest I had no idea. So in my mind, I'd watched a few TED Talks before on YouTube, which I'd stopped after a few minutes, knowing that it probably wasn't really my sort of thing. So today I expected that there may be some stuff which didn't really appeal or I didn't really get on with. And in all honesty, that wasn't the case. There was maybe one speaker who, through no fault of their own, I just didn't really connect with. I didn't feel it was relevant to me. But everything else throughout that day, every other speaker, I felt there was something which I could learn from or take away from or made me think about in a very interesting way. So what I wanted to do with you in this video is sort of go through the different speakers that were there, what they spoke about, and some of the key takeaways that I took away from the event. And also, like I said, if I'm sure TEDx Manchester will put either some clips or some snippets of the talks or the slide decks or whatever onto the internet, and I would implore you to check them out. Otherwise, I would say if you get the opportunity to go to a TED event, I'll go in, like I said, I'm no expert. I've been to one and I've seen plenty online, but I would definitely recommend trying to get to one. I had a fantastic day. I learnt loads. The day went like that. I knew a few people who were also attending, and I just didn't get chance or time to actually meet up with them in the networking event. So I got talking to some very interesting people, and so again, apologies if I didn't, get to see you at the event or we didn't get to chat. But I hope you found it as useful and as thought-provoking as I did. So with that said, let's kick things off and run down the speakers. So in the first session, in the morning session, we kicked off with Andy Burnham, who is the mayor for Greater Manchester, newly elected mayor. I think he's only been, it's a new role, I think he's only been in there for 9 months. And Andy's a very, very good speaker. They kick things off very, very well. I mean, regardless of what you know of Andy Burnham and his politics, he was pivotal in, he's a Scouser, first of all, and a Scouser being, the mayor of Manchester means he must be doing something right. He was apparently pivotal in the Hillsborough inquest a few years ago, and he's very much against the centralised government idea that we have, that London sort of rules the rest of the UK. And especially here in Manchester, a lot of the people who are making key decisions have no idea what it's like to live or be brought up or be around Manchester and other major cities north of Watford. So immediately Andy got us all onto a good foot. We totally got on board with what he had to say, and we touched on obviously the Manchester attack back in May last year. And talked about how proud he was of Manchester and how he truly feels that Manchester will be the place to severely change how government or politics, democracy works in the UK. In fact, one of his quotes, which I noted down, was, "Manchester, we've changed the world before and we can do it again." So again, it was a very motivational, very inspirational talk from Andy, and really sort of kicked things off on the right foot. Again, one of the best speakers of the day. Next up, there was a bit of a mishap with the slide deck for the next speaker, so we skipped on one, and Will Storr came along. Now, Will Storr is a journalist, an author, a novelist, and also an educator, but his main point of talking, his main focus for the event was about stories and storytelling, and how stories play a pivotal role in life, in everything that we sort of touch. He broke down the 6 key steps for effective storytelling, and it was quite funny because the points he made, he would show examples of in not just like J.K. Rowling's work, but some very high level authors' work, but also Spot the Dog, which was very funny, got a few laughs, but the parallels and points he was making were very, very astute. And also, he made, I think one of his closing remarks was, again, it's quite stoic in its message, but it was basically, he made the point that everyone has to remember that someday they're going to die, and everyone that you know is going to die. And it sort of put this weird sort of, this storytelling conclusion, and brought it all around very nicely. So again, great talk by Will Storr. I didn't know Will Storr before this, but again, great presenter. Now, next up was Professor Sheena Cruikshank from the University of Manchester. She's an immunologist, and her talk was about poo, pretty much, but more so about your microbiome and the bacteria and stuff which lives inside of your body. And again, she did a fantastic job of taking something which was on a topic which is very probably at her level as a professor of science, of immunology, it would be very hard for a lot of people to understand, but she broke it down in such a very effective way. Again, this was maybe a talk which wasn't necessarily that relevant to what I do in work or like sort of my philosophy, but I found it very, very interesting to find out more about science and about the immunology of the gut bacteria and all that sort of stuff. Very interesting. Again, great presenter, did a fantastic job. Now, next up was one of maybe 2 quite emotional talks. This one was by Dan Hett. Now, Dan Hett is a creative technologist here in Manchester. He's a BAFTA winning artist and has done many, many brilliant things. But it was, again, the Manchester bombing back in May 2017 where he lost his brother Martin. Now, Martin was such a character, a Manchester, he'd been on TV shows, and the hashtag #BeMoreMartin went around for weeks after the event because he was an example of someone who lived life to the fullest. And Dan told a very, very raw story of how the events that led up to that day, and how him and his family had to, the things that they had to go through, and how he was actually allowed into the Manchester Arena just days, weeks after the bombing happened, but it was still controlled by the police. And he explained the devastation and the scale of damage that he saw on the inside. And then he moved on to how he feels we need to deal with, or how the debate on the effects of extremism has to be had. And again, it was it wasn't hate-filled at all. He was very reasonable, again, almost stoic in his demeanour. But again, you could tell that was a very hard talk to deliver. He delivered it incredibly, incredibly well. And again, I think it resonated with a lot of people in the audience. Again, a lot of Mancunians in the audience. Dan did a fantastic job, great talk, and I think very, very poignant to the audience. And then the last speaker from session 1 was Liv Boeree. Now, again, this is someone I'd not come across before, but she is currently apparently ranked the #1 female poker player in Europe. and she's also an astrophysicist. And her talk was fascinating for someone who, again, likes a little bit of physics and also likes poker. Her talk on statistics and probability was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. She sort of broke down how we shouldn't use words like maybe and probably and stuff like that, because it sets different expectations for different people, and instead produce this percentage scale of words that you should use, which would determine different percentages. And saying how she tries to, in everyday life, she tries to calculate the probability of something happening, and whenever she's asked to do something, will try and give a percentage number rather than say, oh yeah, I'll probably do it, or yeah, maybe I'll see you later. She'll try and give a percentage, which I think if a lot of people took that approach, it would save an awful lot of confusion and an awful lot of missed expectations. So again, a fantastic talk by Liv, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, one of the talks which I got a lot from, because again, I felt I could relate quite a lot to what she was talking about. Now, next up, into the start of the second session after lunch, we had Nadine Shenton, who's a voiceover artist. And again, it was interesting to get an insight into that sort of media role. She went on to explain the different things which voiceover artists do. For me personally, I couldn't quite relate to a lot of the talk. It didn't really have much of an impact for me personally. Again, someone who doesn't really work in that type of media. I work a lot in online media, and that's my recording booth. And so again, it was interesting. It was very heavily focused on the work of voiceover artists. I didn't feel I got too much out of that talk, but again, Nadine was a very likeable person, presented very, very well. However, the next talk was perhaps for me the most relatable one, as it was from an entrepreneur called Vikas Shah. And Vikas is, let me just, again, I got some notes on this other screen, he's Honorary Professor of Business and Entrepreneurship at University of Manchester Business School, as well as Professor of Entrepreneurship for the MIT Sloan Lisbon MBA. He also he's the CEO of the Swisscot Group. He's a venture investor in numerous tech startups. He's co-founder of 53 Degrees North, which is a film studio. Chairman of Manchester's Future Everything, and also online publication Thought Economics. He's done a lot of things with his life. He's obviously what you class as a very successful person, a CEO, philanthropist, an all-round top bloke. What you would class as successful. Now, I didn't know what to expect from Vikas's talk. However, what we got, he's also an MBE, member of the British Empire. So again, very, very successful person on paper. And Vikas was perhaps the most down-to-earth, selfless person who came across that way in his talk, and he actually spoke very candidly and very openly about his own mental health battles. And again, I can't do it justice. This is, if you're subscribed to this channel, this is probably the talk that you should definitely try and track down once it goes online, because he speaks so candidly about his success up to the dot-com bubble burst, and then did it all again, but ultimately the anxiety that came with the position he was in, and how one day he found himself on top of a multi-story car park contemplating stepping off. And he tells you about the phone call he made which basically stopped him from doing that, and how he's all the perceptions of what being a man is, or being a successful person is, and ultimately his take on that. The one thing that I took away, I took many things away from Vikas's talk, but the quote which I sort of made a note of was, vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability is a superpower. It means you can take chances, receive and show empathy, and forgive yourself. And I think that is a message for a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, which they need to hear. And I sincerely hope that we see more of Vikas's message getting spread across all media, really, because I think it was that was for me, I mean, I messaged Vikas after that, and he replied, very, very quickly and very nicely, thanking me for my support. And I said, no, thank you for telling that story, because I think a lot of people need to hear it. Next up, we had, this was the other emotional one. Now, this one was from Dr. Rachel Clark, who is a palliative care doctor. And for anyone who's not familiar with that term, that's basically an end-of-life doctor. She deals with patients who are normally terminally ill, and the patients that come to her don't often leave alive. And whether there was... I think it was quite distracting, because I think halfway through Rachel's talk, someone in our section was cutting onions. Everybody just started to have, tears rolling down their face. It was really awkward. But no, that was the emotional one, and there was a lot of sniffing, a lot of men sort of trying to hide their faces a little bit, and a lot of a lot of that going on. But she tells a very, very good story, and it tied in quite nicely to Will's talk at the beginning session about storytelling, and how ultimately storytelling is just as important when you're at that end of life. And again, she quoted Philip Pullman, which saying, after nourishment, shelter and companionship, stories are the things that we need most. And again, she told an incredibly touching, sad story about her first week in the role as a palliative care doctor. And like I said, I think that set everybody off. And again, I think she ended her talk on the quote that there is always a capacity for healing, even when there is no chance for a cure. Yeah, I can't say anything else. Again, a fantastic talk. Really made a lot of people think. I'm lucky, I have a friend who works in palliative care, and I don't know how she does that job. I couldn't do it. They literally, as far as I'm concerned, they are superheroes. So again, take my hat off to Rachel. After Rachel, we needed a bit of a pick-me-up, and we got Dez Ali, who is an entertainer, comedian. He's been on BBC sort of comedy sketches. He's been on Edinburgh Fringe. He's currently doing a stand-up tour, and boy, did we need that. However, there was still a very good message in Dez's talk about, again, Muslim attitudes in the UK, and he broke down a very serious topic in a very funny way, but also made a lot of people think. And I don't think anybody in that room could have disagreed with what Dez had said or argue against the points that he made. He made them fantastically well, with some humour thrown in, but underneath the tones and the message that he was getting across made perfect sense. And again, very funny guy, but also a very clever guy with a very, very good message to spread about ultimately how we all need to get along, regardless of religion, race, creed, doesn't really matter. And then to end session 2, we actually had a band come on called Caban. They were fantastic. They played their music. They talked a little bit about their influences of global music. And all I'll say is check them out. Definitely Caban, Kabantu. Go and check them out. Now on to the third and final session of the day. We had Jamie Bartlett, who is an author and also the director at the Centre of the Analysis of Social Media. He's pretty much a very, very acute observer. Apparently back in 2014, he was talking about darknet and Bitcoin, and obviously he pretty much predicted how they would boom. And his talk today was much more about the state of nation states and how democracy is changing and all this sort of quite weird stuff. But again, it was looking at his past record, you have to sort of take it sort of seriously. You think this guy, he's Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this all the time. He doesn't predict the future. He gets in there and sees how things are and where they're going. And I feel Jamie is exactly the same. He got involved in the darknet and in Bitcoin at a very early stage and predicted where it was going to go. And I think that is what he's done in this talk, where again he talks about the democracy and how things were changing amongst young people, and young people's idea of democracy is nowhere near what it was, 30 years ago. And with that comes a change. And I think one of his quotes for the talk was, if you think this period that we're going through now is disruptive, you sort of haven't seen anything yet. We're not over that. We've still got a long way to go in this disruption and this overthrowing of the current system. Again, very interesting talk. Being a bit of a politics nerd at the side, I found it quite interesting. He also started talking about psychedelic drugs, and I sort of didn't quite get that. But again, very good talk. Next up, we had a harpist or a singer-songwriter, Lucinda Bell, who told a fantastic story about her journey, her career, but told in broken down into 4 points. She also played some beautiful harp music and again showed off the talent. I think her big thing was that inspiration squashes fear. That was the big point from her talk. And yeah, being outside the comfort zone is a good thing, which again I totally agree with. And again, very, very talented musician. Definitely check her out. On to the penultimate talk, we had a chap called Rasmus Ankersen. Now, this was, again, a little bit interesting. He's based in football and performance, but he did a very, again, interesting talk about statistics and how they use statistics to predict things that happen within football games and how that can be attributed to other things in life. Again, very interesting talk. Maybe not as relevant to some of the stuff that I found Liv's talk about statistics and probability a little bit more easy to relate to. I'm not a huge football guy, but again, still very good speaker, very good talk, and I enjoyed his analysis of Nokia and how the sort of demise of Nokia can happen to any business due to not keeping an eye on stats and getting almost complacent with success. In fact, he made a point which was a very good point, which is success is when luck gets confused for genius, which again found very interesting. And the final talk was Max Joseph, who was perhaps arguably the most famous speaker, the guy who a lot of people know from Catfish and has seen in Casey Neistat's vlogs. He's a filmmaker, has worked with Casey in the past, and his talk was actually on being a minor celebrity. Now, this was, again, very interesting, but I found Max's overall positivity fantastic. His optimistic outlook on everything that he spoke about was almost contagious. You could just get it. And he talked about, he was very humble and classed himself very openly as a minor celebrity. He even made the point that Andy Burnham, the mayor, was up here and he was down here in terms of celebrity status. And spoke about how he doesn't quite, he's not like George Clooney and doesn't like get big brands trying to give him free things, but on the flight over here he got a free sandwich because the air hostess recognised him. But he spoke about he feels very fortunate because he gets to see people's best self, because people recognise him sometimes, and just by him being him, it sort of makes people light up a little bit and get excited, and they want to interact and be nice to him. And he says he's very privileged to have that he gets to see people at their best. He told a very good anecdote of a barista in a coffee shop, and how he could tell she was having a bad day, and then ultimately she sees him and takes a selfie, and ultimately she gives him some free stuff, and but it made her day just by meeting him. Having that ability was a very privileged position to be in. And again, Max seemed a very humble guy, and I couldn't really there was no ego with him at all. And again, I just loved the overall message to end the talk was fantastic. Again, showing your best self. He sort of broke down the pros and cons of being a minor celebrity in a comedic fashion. Made the joke how everybody calls him Neve, and he thinks he's the main guy or the presenter from Catfish. But yeah, very, very good talk. Very likeable guy. It felt very natural. It didn't feel like a rehearsed talk. It felt like he was talking to me one-on-one. We were just having a chat. It was a very comfortable chat, and a great way to end what was a fantastic day. Like I said, I'm not sure when the links to these sort of talks will be up, but I definitely suggest that you check them out. As soon as I see them out, I'll probably update the description down below with the links. And yeah, the overall message is I just want to share with you like my experience from TEDx Manchester, and implore you that if you're a fan of TED Talks, they surpassed my expectations of the event before I went. And I'm a big fan of TED. You know, I've always been a fan for many years now. And yeah, I would totally recommend it. And to be a massive hat tip to Herb Kim, who was the organizer for TEDx Manchester. Apparently this was the largest TEDx event certainly in North America and Europe. He thinks there was one in Argentina which was slightly bigger, but maybe the second biggest TEDx event in the world ever. And it was fantastic to be a part of it. And I do implore you, whenever you get the opportunity, to attend a TEDx event near you, or a TED event, if you get the opportunity. And yeah, next on my to-do list is to one day speak at a TED event. That would be that's on the bucket list, I believe. Hopefully I can have a story or a message that is worth saying on that scale, on that stage. But with that said, like I said, this was a very quick video. Well, it's not a quick video, it's quite a long video, but I wanted to share with you my events, my takeaways from the event. Yeah, that's basically it. If you get the opportunity, please go. If you've enjoyed this video and this insight, please leave a like. If you were there at the event, share with me what your sort of key takeaways were, what your favourite, who your favourite speakers were. And yeah, I'd love to have that conversation for those conversations I didn't get to have in person at the event. And if you're new here, subscribe. I do try and make content at least weekly, sometimes a few times a week, all about the journey of entrepreneurship, e-commerce, marketing, whatever it may be. That said, enjoy the rest of your Monday. Have a fantastic day. Have a fantastic week. And I'll catch you in the next video. I'll see you then. Goodbye.